Without further ado, Howard Fuller is a distinguished professor of education and founder-director of the Institute for Transformation of Learning at Marquette University. Immediately before his appointment at Marquette University, Dr. Fuller served as the superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools. His prior positions also included director of the Milwaukee County Department of Health and Human Services, dean of general education at the Milwaukee Area Technical College, secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Employment Relations, and associate director of Educational Opportunity Program at Marquette University. He was also a senior fellow with the Annenberg Institute for School Reform at Brown University from 1995 to 1997. In 1962, he received his bachelor's degree in sociology from Carroll College and his master's degree in social administration from Western Reserve University, and that was completed in 1964. And he completed his doctorate in sociology, sociological foundations of education from Marquette University in 1986. He has received numerous awards and recognition over the years, including 3 honorary doctorate degrees, a doctorate of human letters from Carroll College in 1987, a doctorate of laws from Marion College in 1992, and doctorate of business and economics from Milwaukee School of Engineering in 1995. He also serves on the Trans Center for Youth Board of Directors, the Crusade to Save Our Children, the Johnson Foundation, the Dorothy Danforth Compton Fellowship Program, and he's an active member of several other community and national organizations. Now, the organization BAO has been in existence for about 8 years, approximately 8 years. And the mission of BAO is to actively support parental choice to empower families and increase quality education options for Black children. And that's a summary, more or less, of what Dr. Fuller is going to bring to us tonight. So, Dr. Fuller, I'd like to bring you forward.
Thank you very much. It's actually pretty cool to be back in Portland. I was here about 25 years ago. And someone asked me today had it changed, and I had to admit I don't know, because I don't remember. I don't know, so. But I want to begin by thanking the pastor of this church and the members of this church for hosting us this evening. I also want to thank Smitty for that very nice introduction. I want to thank the BAO members out here who are trying to develop a chapter. I want to thank Cascade for making it possible for me to be here. But most important, I want to thank each one of you for being here. Because I know you could be watching American Idol, and I know the Pistons playing the Heat. So, I'm just, honored and humbled that you all would leave that to come out here. So I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. The reason why I'm here, someone asked me, well, why do you do this? Why do you go all around the country talking about parent choice and getting people all riled up and mad, and what is this really all about? And I have to be very honest with you and say that I'm here and I go do this because I actually believe deep in my heart that our children are our most precious gift, and that it is our responsibility, with God's guidance, to love them, to care for them, to nurture them, and to make sure that every single one of them is educated. And so that's why I'm here. And some years ago, a Reverend Patrick O'Neill, pastor of the First Parish Unitarian Universalist Church in Farmington, Massachusetts, was given a speech. And he cited one of the traditions of the Maasai. And those of you who know anything about Africa know that the Maasai were the most fierce warriors on the continent. They're the ones, when you get the African statues, that have the carvings in their face. And no tribe was considered more intelligent and more fierce than the Maasai. And they had a traditional greeting that they would say when they passed each other, and it was Casa Ingira, which means, and how are the children? This was their way of acknowledging the high value that the Messiah placed on their children's well-being. And even the members of the tribe who had no children would always answer by saying, all the children are well. And this was their way of saying that peace and safety prevailed and that they had a priority in protecting the young, the powerless, and that when they could say all the children was well, that means that it was in place. And so I keep asking myself, what if we adopted that in America? And we forced every governor, every superintendent, every president, every mayor to start out the day by saying, and how are the children? And you know what? If we responded that all the children are well, we'd be lying. Because in America, all the children are not well. Some of the children are well, those with resources, those with loving, caring parents, those who have adults who believe in them and care for them. And frankly, not even all of them are well. But I keep saying to myself, the children who are definitely not well are those who are victimized every day because they're children of color or they're poor. And it is our poorest children of all colors who know hunger, who know what it's like to never see a person in their family go to work. They know what it's like to sit in classrooms every day with teachers who have long since, quote, given up on their kind. And they suffer every day because, to be honest about it, there is no urgency in America to deal with their issues. Oh, you know, we have all these speeches and meetings, and people go to conferences, and they go home congratulating themselves on how wonderful the workshops were. But after all of that's said and done, for these children, nothing changes. And you all know the data. And you know what angers me about the data? What angers me more than the data is the fact that we're not angry. And so the reality of it is there is no demand in this country to leave no children behind. There are slogans, there are people who mouth this, but in reality, there isn't a commitment in this country to every child. And our poorest children suffer from all kinds of ills, but our focus tonight is education, or probably more important, or better said, the lack of education for so many of them. And I want to be clear to you all, I agree with what Ron Edmonds said years ago. He said that we can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know more than we need to know to get it done. Whether or not we do it must finally depend upon how we feel about the fact that we've not done it so far. And so I don't believe the problem in America is that we don't know what to do. I believe the problem is we don't have the political will to do what we know must be done. And the reason why is because, like Lisa Delpit talked about, these are other people's children. And we may not want to admit it in America, but we have allowed to grow up in our midst a group of kids that we consider throwaway children. And we have to say we've done it because we're throwing their lives away every day. And I'm a person, and I'm gonna just be blunt, I can't accept it. I don't know how many of y'all read, back in the 60s, there was a book called Black Rage. And, these, and the book talked about any relatively conscious black person ought to be in a constant state of rage. And you looking at them. That's me. And over the years, I done learned how to negotiate my rage, but the rage is like 1 inch below the surface because I see the tragedy that is occurring in this country every day with our children. And I want to say to you all, with all due respect, that we will never, never deal with this problem if we keep trying to just, quote, fix the existing system. We need a revolution. We need a radical change in our thinking and in our practice. And it is absolutely clear to me that the most powerful innovations in education must occur in a classroom between teachers and students. But I believe you have to create the conditions that allow that to happen. And I want to make an argument tonight that we need to replace our current school systems with a system of learning opportunities that will put the interests of students first, that will allow dollars to follow students, and that will hold adults as well as students accountable for student learning. Because the reality of it is the way our system is set up today, the only people who suffer from not being educated are our children. And the adults who are responsible for educating them get a raise. And our children get a life of despair. And people say, well, Howard, why you talk like that? I talk like that because that is the way that it is. And y'all need to understand that my most favorite social philosopher is Chris Rock. And that'll show you the level that I'm operating at. But the one thing that Chris Rock says is you have to keep it real. And ain't no sense in talking if you ain't gonna keep it real. And so my argument is that we must have radical change because far too many of our children are not being served by our current systems of education. They don't do well on various forms of assessments. Their schooling gives them pathways to the lowest rung of America's ladder of success. Their parents are unhappy, uninvolved, unempowered. Their school environments physically and mentally are structured in ways that devalue them as people and are contemptuous of the communities from where they come. And when they don't learn, they and their families are blamed. I done heard people tell me, Howard, you don't understand. It's the role of the parents to educate the kids. And I said, well, if that's the fact, then let's close down these multi-billion-dollar educational institutions and get the money to the parents. Because, and I done had teachers telling me, oh, Howard, I could do a better job if I just had better kids. And oh yeah, now I understand the problem. Because the problem is these parents, they done send us their worst kids. And they got their best kids at home. And they're waiting to see how we do with their worst kids. And if we do a good job with their worst kids, then they're gonna send us their best kids. So just hold on, because the best kids are coming. But the reality is the parents have sent us the only kids that they got. And I know that parents have a significant role in the education of children. But we, those of us who are educators, we gotta teach the kids, no matter what is happening with the parents. But we got too many people who are teaching kids that used to be there, the kids they wish were there, and not the kids who are actually there. People say kids have problems. Hello? Is that a new learning? Of course kids have problems. Kids have always had problems. Who created these problems that these kids are having? And I'm saying to you all here tonight is that we cannot solve this problem when we still have people telling our children that my check is going to come whether you learn or not. When we still in 2006 have people telling our kids, I got mine, you got to get yours. What kind of attitude is that we think that don't impact our children? And I want to be very clear here. I am not saying that our existing systems of education don't have some excellent educators, and I'm sure there's some of you all in this room. Every school system in America has excellent educators in that system. People who are doing heroic jobs every day. But the reality of it is that we have people working in a system that is dysfunctional. And you can have good people working hard every day, but if the system is dysfunctional, you will never be able to realize the expectations that you have and the goals that you have for the children. And so I just want to present to you all tonight the idea that one of the weapons that we need is parental choice. And I want to be real clear about what I mean by parental choice. And I want to be clear because there's so much disinformation that is spread about this concept. Parental choice, to me, means empowering parents to be able to choose the best place for their children. Now, vouchers is one form of parental choice, and I support low-income, means-tested vouchers. But that's not the only form of parental choice. Charter schools are a form of parental choice. There are tax credit ideas. Homeschooling is a form of parental choice. There are options within the traditional system that are forms of parental choice. What I want to argue for is whatever will give a parent, and particularly low-income and working-class parents, a chance to choose where's the best place for my child, that's what we should fight for. And people say, well, Howard, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to destroy public education. I want to make it clear tonight, there's a difference between public education and the system that delivers public education. And you have to be clear about that distinction, because it's like talking about religion and churches. There's religion, and there's a whole bunch of different churches that deliver religion. And because I may oppose a delivery system does not mean that I oppose public education. Because public education, at the end of the day, has to be based on the public's interests. And the public's interest is in having kids learn. And so wherever we can send kids that can learn, it's in the public's interest for them to learn. Because at some point in America, we got to make a decision. Are we going to put our resources on the front end, or are we going to put it on the back end? Because if we don't educate them, we're going to have to jail them. And so when I look at the world, I say to myself, whatever we can do to get kids in a place where they can learn, that's what we need to do. Malcolm X said, by any means necessary. And I'm an any means necessary person. And I want to be real clear to all of you all in this room. There ain't nothing new about parent choice. Because if you got money in America, you got choice. And everybody in this room knows that those of us who got money If schools don't work for our kids, we're going to do one of two things. We're going to move to communities where they do work, or we're going to put our kids in private schools, and you don't care what the government says. And you got all of these hypocrites running around here talking about, oh, no, I'm not for parent choice. Ask them where their kids are. You got teachers teaching in schools that they would never put their own children in, demanding that other people's children stay there. Hypocrites. Oh, yeah, I think it's important that we keep the people in the system. Well, what about your children? Where your kids go to school? Well, that's a different discussion. No, it ain't a different discussion. It's the same discussion. I read a book once called Exit, Voice, and Loyalty. A little book. And the person's really opposed to vouchers, but makes an argument for vouchers. Because what he says is, if you in an organization and you have no power to exit, your voice is diminished. Because if you're in an organization and people know you can't go nowhere, your voice is diminished. If you're in an organization and people know that you have the power to leave, and yet you stay, you develop a deeper form of loyalty to that organization. Everywhere I go in this country, when I speak to parents, I ask the question, how many crazy parents are in the room? Hands shoot up all over the place. I ain't even defined what it is, but they instinctively know what is a crazy parent. Crazy parent is the one that has the audacity to go up to the school. You the ones that when they see you coming, you know what I'm saying? They like board up the doors. They like put webbing on the air conditioning vents because they don't want you in the school. But you know what? What I say to the crazy parents is that if you went up to these schools and people knew that if they didn't treat your child right, that you're going to take your child, and when your child leaves, the money leaves, there'll be a different discussion about your child in America. And so what I'm arguing is we need to give poor parents, low-income, working-class parents, some of these opportunities to choose. How can we have an America where only those of us with money can make choices for our children's education? Now, I'm about done because I want to give a lot of time for questions. But I want you to think about this, because I'm talking about schools and changing systems. And like one of the things I talked about today was we talk about our kids got like attention deficit disorder. Our kids bored. That's the disorder they got. They like bored. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Our kids are digital natives, and most of us are digital immigrants. You know, a digital immigrant, we're the ones who, when you get a document, somebody send you a document, say, hey, read this document. Let's assume we're even on the computer, but read this document and make some changes. What do? You print it out, get your pencil and you start making the changes on the paper. Then you go back to the computer and start putting the changes in that you just made. You the kind when you get a cool website in your office, you like call people, hey, come over here and see this, instead of sending them the URL. You the ones who call people and say, did you get my email? You know what I'm saying? I mean, like the greatest invention that's ever been made is an iPod, because I'm like a DJ. And, you know, I do parties and stuff, so, I mean, the idea that I can carry my whole music collection on my belt buckle, the world is good. How could anything be better than that? But if you think about our kids and the way they think, it's like I was telling people this afternoon, You know, I was in the Mac store, in Apple store, and they got the new iPods, the ones that got the videos and stuff on it. And Beyonce almost made me buy one, because she on it. But the problem is, she moving so fast, I couldn't see the moves, but I knew they was good. I just couldn't see them. And our kids are like thinking at a whole different like pace. But yet we got them all confined in this little room, you know, but they're thinking differently. Their minds are thinking differently. They're going faster. It's like I was telling today that, you know, I'm 65. I decided, man, you can't be in this world and don't have a PlayStation 2. So, you know, I went out and got me one. But then I had to get this little 9-year-old dude to come over. He was going to train me. And it was like the most humbling experience. You got a 9-year-old that's just killing you. You know, Uncle Howard, you got to move faster, man. And, you know, and I knew what to do, but I just couldn't do it. And he was like, I mean, y'all think about this. Think about the kind of changes that we got to make. But it's deeper than that. Think about this. I just got through reading The World is Flat. If you want to read a scary book, read The World is Flat. Because what he's talking about, you know, a big thing for the last few years was everybody get up talking about it takes a whole village to raise a child. Now, most of the people saying it ain't been nowhere near the village, don't know who in the village, they just talking about the village, okay? So I'm tired of hearing about the village. So in The World is Flat, they got a different African parable that I want to leave with you. And here's what they say. They say that every morning in Africa, a gazelle gets up. And the gazelle knows that if it can't run faster than the fastest lion, it's going to get killed. Every day in Africa, a lion gets up, knowing that if it can't run faster than the slowest gazelle, it's going to starve. Either way, when the sun comes up, they both start running. And what's happening is, all over this world, young people are getting up and they're running faster than our young people. And you got to think about this world that we're living in. Because you pick up a phone and you call because you got problems with your cell phone. And the person who answers the phone, his name is Bob. And you think you're talking to Bob from Des Moines. You're really talking to Rajiv, who lives in Bangalore, India. There's 245,000 Indians every day answering phones and selling stuff to people in America. You go to the hospital and they do your x-ray, and you think your doctor is looking at the x-ray. The x-ray is being sent in real time to Malaysia. And somebody in Malaysia is looking at your x-ray. Do you realize how this world has changed? Did you see that show by Stossel called Stupid in America? And did you see, like, supposedly kids from our smartest schools, like, took this test, and they talking about how good they did on it, when in fact they did terrible? They showed these kids in Belgium who took the same tests, got over 70, we were in the 40s, and this little kid from Belgium looked into the TV screen and said, American kids are stupid. Now, if that's true for our smartest kids, what in the world do you think is happening for the kids in Portland who can't read and write? For the kids that we graduate who don't have the capacity to compete in this world? We living in a world of illusions. And illusions ain't never set nobody free. And so I'm saying to you that we got a lot of work to do. And y'all can be against choice, fine. You against choice? Then tell me what you for. And tell me, when is it gonna start making a difference? how many more people, young people, are we going to lose waiting for the system to get better? Now, I talked about schools, but let me talk about something else for a minute before I stop. Race and class are real issues in America. Let me be clear about that. Race and class have an impact on our kids' reality and their life chances. Because if you black or brown in America, it means something. And I know people say, well, but we got a colorless society. We ain't have no colorless society. We ain't never had it, ain't never gonna have it, and why should we have it? If you think about it. I mean, it's like people look at me, you know, I have some white friends look at me and say, well, Howard, when I see you, I don't see a black person. Scare the hell out of me. I'm like, well, oh my God, what, what do you see? You know, I mean, and then like what I really try to understand is that to really value me, you don't have to neuter me. The reality is I'm black. The question is, what difference does that make to you? It's not my blackness that's an issue. It's your perception of what my blackness means that is the issue. And we don't need no like, I mean, the beauty of America is like not the melting pot that melts all of us away. The beauty of America is the stew. So you still see the potatoes. And you still see the, you know, the ribs and the tomatoes, because it's that diversity that gives it flavor. And it's that flavor that makes it good. And that's true in America. We just got to come to realize that America belongs to all of us. And money matters in America. The only people who will ever tell you that money don't matter are people who got money. You know, don't no poor people be rolling around America talking about how wonderful it is to be broke. Money matters. Race matters. And so what we got to do is we got to step back and say, we got to do something about what happens to our kids before they ever get to school. Because children who are hungry cannot learn. Children who are abused and neglected cannot concentrate in school. Children need to see somebody in their neighborhood go to work to understand the value of work and the connection between work and education. Children must see a society where their race will not be an impediment to advancement and respect. Children need to interact with adults who've not already reached conclusions about what they're capable of because of the color of their skin or how they wear their hair or the clothes that they wear. I mean, I see people looking at these young brothers today, you know, they got their pants all low and everything. They all looking at them. I look at them, I say, hey man, that's somebody who understands physics, because there's no other way to explain how they can keep walking. And so I'm in awe. I mean, I ain't hating. I ain't hating. I'm in awe because I'm trying to like, man, how you tell me how you do that? You know what I'm saying? I mean, because we always dissing our young people. You know, we diss their music. You know, luda who. You hear people still think that 50 cents is like half a dollar. 50 cents? No, I got $1. P. Diddy, who was this Tupac? Tupac. Who was that? You know what I mean? It's like the older a lot of us get, the more angelic becomes our own youth. I'll let that settle for a minute. Because I know I got some witnesses in here. Because I know some of y'all were like knuckleheads when you were young. And you keep telling your kids, oh, I always did what my mama told me. You lying. You didn't always do what your mama told you. That's why you got in so much trouble that your kids don't know about. I mean, just think about this. I mean, you think about, now some of y'all, when you get to talking about these kids' music, for example, and some of y'all are too young, so y'all not gonna get this, okay? But there's some of y'all in here who might remember a group called Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. They had a record out called Work With Me, Annie. And the sequel was Annie had a baby and can't work no more. You see? You know what I'm saying? So when y'all start talking about these young people's music, remember that. When y'all start talking about Candy Shop, Marvin Cease had one out called Candy Liquor. When y'all start talking about people, Clarence Carter had one out called Stroking. Stroking. Stroking to the east, stroking to the west, stroking to the south, stroking to the north. Clarence Carter, Clarence Carter. So I'm just trying to tell you, every generation has some music that shocks adults. That's why you young, who wants music that your mama like? Now, some of this stuff is out there. I agree with you, the misogyny and all of that stuff. But I'm just trying to make a point that every generation has its own rhythm and its own way of dealing with the world. And you cannot diss them because of where they are in their world. What we have to do is connect to them. Because when you diss young people, they not feeling it, and they not trying to hear what you got to say after you get through dissing them. And I'm gonna say one more thing, and then I'm gonna stop. We need people with our children who love our children. And when I say that, people get the shuffling around in their seats. Because they said to me, well, Howard, are you trying to tell me that I got to love these kids like I do my husband or my wife or my significant other? And my answer to that is I don't know, because I don't know how you love your husband or your wife or your significant other. But in reality, the answer is I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about agape. I'm talking about unredeeming love, expecting nothing in return. I read a book by Marianne Williamson called Return to Love. And where she was talking about this fable of the frog and the princess, and how the princess kissed the frog and turned the frog into a prince. And what she said is that this fable is about the miraculous power of love to create the conditions for transformation. Because if you don't love people, you cannot understand them. And if you don't understand them, you cannot reach them. And if you cannot reach them, how in the world do you think that you can teach them? So we got to understand how this race and class stuff works and how all these things work. But there's a difference between understanding the impact that race and class has and using that as an excuse not to educate them. It's one thing to understand it. It's another thing to use that as an excuse to say they cannot learn. Because our children can learn. Howard Gardner has this thing about multiple intelligences. And he says the question is not how intelligent are you? The question is, how are you intelligent? Because all of our kids have a genius. Mortimer Adler said there are no unteachable children. What they are adults who have not figured out a way to teach them. So we have a lot of work to do in America. But the beauty of it is, if we care enough, we can do it. The question is, do we care enough? And so I leave you with the words of William Daggett. He said that we must love our children's hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, and their prayers more than we love the institutional heritage of the school system. Thank you very much. Thank you. So now it's your chance. I'll be very happy. I want to thank you again for having me on your radio show. It was great. I appreciate it. And it was great to meet you. So, questions?
Where do you suggest we start as individuals? I mean, how can we don't even have children.
Right.
So how can we start participating in the system to get change?
I'll repeat the question. The question she asked was, where do you start as individuals? They don't even have children. How do they get involved, or where do they start to try to bring something about? That question was asked to me this afternoon, and the only way I know how to respond to it is, as individuals, we have to find a group. Because it's very hard to get change in a society working as individuals. What we got to try to find in the city of Portland or all of this area is, are there a group of like-minded individuals who are prepared to actually fight for a change that is going to be meaningful? I can't answer that question. You all have to answer that question. But let me try to help you by saying this, because a lot of times people say, well, you know, we just don't have enough people and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to give you two examples. I went to the Million Man March. 10 years from now, I don't expect to meet a single black man that wasn't there. Every black man 10 years from now is going to be at the Million Man March. So it's really the 10 billion man march. On February 1st, 1960, think about this. On February 1st, 1960, 4 students from North Carolina A&T, where my son graduated from, sat down at a lunch counter and demanded to be served. In 2006, our kids sit down at a lunch counter where they're welcome and can't read the menu. But if you ask anybody who's like my age and stuff, how many people was at Woolworths? Thousands. Because the further you get away from something, the more of us were in it. And so I have a theory of how you organize change, how the small group of individuals, I believe that there's a small group of individuals who will storm the Bastille. There's another group of individuals who will hold their coats. They're not going to storm the Bastille, but they'll hold the coats of the people who are going to storm the Bastille. There's another group of people who will cheer for the people who hold in the coats. Okay, they ain't going to hold the coats, and they ain't going to storm the Bastille, but they'll cheer for the coat holders. The reality of it is, to bring about change, you got to find that small core of people who are totally committed to doing this. And they understand they're going to have to take the weight for trying to get this done. And ultimately, they're going to have to figure out how to use the coat holders and how to use the cheerleaders in order to bring about the change. And as I was saying earlier this evening when brother was talking to me about how difficult all of this is, I explained to him, and she knows about this, but in 1972, well, actually in 1971, I spent 30 days with a guerrilla column in Mozambique. They were fighting the Portuguese. And I came back and made the decision to organize African Liberation Day in DC in 1972. We had 30,000 black people that marched. There was no way that I ever thought that I would see Mandela walk out of prison. I never thought in my lifetime I would see the end to apartheid. I never thought in my lifetime I would see the wall come down between East and West Berlin. And I'm saying all that to say that monumental change occurs because a small group of committed people make a decision that it has to change. And you look at it, and it is so powerful that there's no way that you think that the change can ever occur. But we have too many instances in history where monumental changes have taken place when nobody thought it could ever happen in their lifetime. And so what I would hope would come out of my time spent here and the work that other people are doing is that you all will identify a core group of people in this area who are going to make a decision that something drastic has to happen for the kids who need it to happen in order for them to get an education in this city. I know of no other way for it to happen.
What do you propose to do for the children whose parents do not make this choice?
Right. I think what I would propose to do is let's first give parents the choice. And then let's talk about how we're going to expand that to people who are not using it. And the reason why I say it that way is, what are we doing today? What are we doing today for those very same parents? And at some point in time, I want to be very clear about this. I want to make I belong to the Harriet Tubman school of thought. Harriet Tubman got up every day and said, I want to end slavery. But in the meantime, I'm going to rescue as many as I can. And where I'm at is, I want all of the kids to ultimately get the best education possible. I want all of the parents to get to the point where they will make the best decisions that they can for their children. But in the meantime, I want to create something where the parents who are ready to make it and willing to make it, that they can make it. And then we can start talking about how we're going to deal with all of the others. Because that's the problem now. When I was the superintendent of the Milwaukee Public Schools, I assigned parents to schools every year, and I knew when I sent their kids over there, they weren't going to learn nothing. And so when I sit here now, it's hard for me to say, well, because you may have some parents who may not choose or some parents who may not figure it out, we can't have it for no parents. I say no. I say let's start with the parents who can do it, and let's keep trying to expand the number of parents who ultimately will. You will never get anywhere unless you get started. You can't get up the hill if you don't take the first step to move towards getting up the hill. So my response is, you start with a program that will allow parents to choose. You help the parents who you can initially help, and you keep trying to deepen the number. Because in 1990, when we started the choice program in Milwaukee, we heard the same thing. These people ain't gonna be able to choose. They ain't gonna do this, they ain't gonna do that. We now got 15,000 kids who are using a voucher in the city of Milwaukee. So at some point in time, thousands of low-income parents figured out how to use choice. We got to keep trying to expand it. That's all we can do.
Just a brief follow-up on that. For people who like that vision, can you explain how in Milwaukee, if you're a parent and you decide that the school your kid is in isn't working for you, so what happens next? How does one actually use the voucher? What does the parent do to make it work?
Okay, the way that the voucher program works, and I want to be real clear, I don't go all over the place saying people in Portland ought to do what we, I just explain it, you look at it, you determine whether or not this kind of thing would work for you. It may not because of the circumstances in Portland, I don't know. The way it works in Milwaukee is you have to live in the city of Milwaukee. You have to be 175% of poverty. So the program was set up for the poorest parents. I chair the board of a small Christian high school. The way that the kids get to our school is that they say, I want to go to CEO Leadership Academy. CO Leadership Academy has to meet certain criteria to become accepted into the program. Once we're accepted into the program, we have to take all kids. We can't use any kind of like entrance requirements or anything like that. Any parent who is 175% of poverty and wants their child to go to our school has a right to go to our school until we fill up. And then when we fill up, we have to do a lottery or create a waiting list. The way you do it is you go to CO Leadership Academy, you show that you are low income, and you sign a form that essentially says to the state, I am choosing this school for my child. We then submit those forms to the state. The state then sends the check to the school for each one of the kids whose parent has signed the form saying, I want my kid to go to this school. So in essence, the voucher goes to the parent, not to the school. The parent directs the voucher or the money, basically, to the school, and it's done in 4 payments. So it's a very, it's not, the parents don't have to go through a whole lot of hoops and to get there. They just simply have to choose the school that they want to go to. If they've been accepted as a part of the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program, they sign the forms, and then the money comes to the school. Is that that's the process. Yep.
I don't get why you're changing schools, like trying to get kids to better schools because, well, the schools to me seem like they're normal, like they're teaching us good.
Okay, and what I would say to you is that if that's true, then you wouldn't change the school. If say you're doing well in a school, then I would argue there's no reason for you to change the school. But say for any reason you're not doing well in the school, and you could get like a change in environment that may better help you. Because you could have people in what is a great school for everybody else's kid except yours. And so the idea is for you to have the ability to make a change. Do you play sports? Okay. Let's say that you're on a basketball team and you play the same position as LeBron James. Your chances of becoming great is like not so good. But let's say you were able to go to another team who didn't have LeBron James. So now you're in a better situation because you've changed teams, because that's a better fit for you at another place. And so the idea would be the same in a school.
So you're saying if I'm second string from LeBron James, he'd play more for me, and if I switch to another team, I get to play more?
Exactly. You have a very analytical mind. And so you're much further advanced than a lot of adults on this issue. But essentially that's what it is. But the argument that we've always made is people said, well, once you have choice, there's gonna be a quote brain drain. All the best minds gonna leave. The opposite, in fact, has occurred. Because people who are doing well normally don't leave. It's the people who are doing least well that are looking for opportunities for their kids. And that's what choice has provided in Milwaukee. Thank you for the question.
Dr. Fuller, how did you get the buy-in from who would normally be opponents, or at least they are here in Oregon, of the choice concept, whether it's vouchers, charters, private, or what have you, from a very large special interest group, your State Education Association?
Yeah, it's pretty strong. It's very strong. The way that we got the voucher program in Milwaukee was a black Democratic state legislator named Polly Williams, who actually was out here in the 1991 or back then. Polly and I went to high school together. We went to North Division. North Division is exactly like Jefferson. There's a North Division cluster just like there's a Jefferson cluster. We've been trying for years to turn North into a great school. My 4 years as superintendent, I thought I could do it. It was my high school. I was the superintendent. I was unsuccessful. So what happened was, back in the 1970s, there was I don't know if people realize it, but actually in '69, the Office of Economic Opportunity, the poverty program, was created. As a part of the poverty program, there was actually a demonstration voucher program. And two communities got these vouchers. One of them was called Alum Rock, out in California, I think, and somewhere else. We tried to get the program in Milwaukee because what was happening was the Catholic schools were closing in the inner city, and they created what were called community schools like Urban Day and Harambe. And so the effort was made to try to become one of those demonstration projects, but that failed. So what occurred in Milwaukee was that over a period of time, in 1972, we had an integration thing, out-of-court settlement. All the black people who supported integration felt like if they could just get black kids in schools sitting next to white kids, that they were going to learn. So they came into our communities and they bused black children out of one community to over 100 different elementary schools. And they scattered black kids out all over the city. Everybody thought, okay, now our kids are really doing great. What was happening was we didn't understand tracking. We didn't understand all the different ways that a kid could be in a classroom and be ignored. We didn't understand a whole lot of things. The thing we didn't know was they were hiding what was happening to black kids in aggregate data. And later on, as we had more Latino kids, the same thing began to happen. So we began a battle, because they built a new high school, North. They tore the old school down, built a new school, and they wanted to turn it into a specialty school and kick all the neighborhood kids out. We fought it. Polly was a part of that. That's how we started. We started fighting to say the school district needs to educate poor kids. When the school district couldn't educate or wouldn't, we asked for the North Division cluster to become a separate school district. We wanted to secede from the Milwaukee Public Schools. And we actually had a vote in the legislature. It got through the assembly, and it got killed in the Senate. So we had gone from trying to get the system to educate poor black kids to trying to have our own school district. The next argument for us was, you won't let us do it, you ain't gonna do it, so let us out of here. So Polly put together what became the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program. The legislature was controlled by Democrats. The only way we got it through was Polly was able to shame enough Democrats, and they restricted it to just Milwaukee, not the rest of the state. There was a black state senator named Gary George, who was the head of Joint Finance, which is the most powerful committee in the legislature, like what probably Ways and Means for you or whatever, you know the one I'm talking about. They agreed to put it in the budget bill, because it never would have made it as a separate bill. So you know how you put stuff in the budget bill and people can hold their nose and say, I voted for it, but only because they had this other stuff in the budget bill. I worked for a Democratic governor named Tony Earl. Tony got defeated by a Republican named Tommy Thompson. If Tommy Thompson had not been the governor, we would never have gotten the program because Tony would have vetoed it, okay? So we had these two black Democrats who worked together, got it to the governor's desk. The Republican governor said, if it gets to my desk, I'll sign it. The politics of it is that at this point in time, we only have 2 Democrats from the city of Milwaukee who support the program. All the rest of them are opposed. And so you got the untenable situation of out-state Republicans supporting the program, Democrats in the city whose kids are benefiting, opposing the program, And when you talk to them privately, it's all because it's a Democrat-Republican thing. And that's the politics of it. And the only way we were able to get it was the scenario that I just described. And then in 1995, when we expanded it from just non-sectarian schools to include religious schools, the only way we got that through the legislature was because for one session, both houses were controlled by Republicans, and Tommy was the governor, and we got it through. And then the Supreme Court in 1998 ruled that the program was constitutional. That's the only way that we were able to expand it. That's the politics of it. Is that a clear enough response to what you're raising? And it is politically tenuous because of what I just described. Now, we just went through a brutal battle to get the cap raised because there was a cap of 15% of MPS's population on the program. We reached the cap, which would have meant rationing was going to take place. Because now we have a Democratic governor who's hostile, and we have Republican-controlled the legislature. We got bills through him 3 times to lift the cap. He vetoed them every time. So what we did was we forced the Department of Public Instruction to follow the letter of the law, which was, now that you've reached the cap, you have to ration. For 3 years, we've been telling people, when you get the cap, there's going to be a ration. But you know how people are. When you talk about something that's theoretical, they're not feeling it. When it actually happens and all of a sudden it became clear that 9,000 kids were going to be kicked out of school, we had a whole different mindset. We spent close to $400,000 on ads with kids telling the governor, "You destroying my dreams." With black parents, a black truck driver, almost in tears saying, "Why are you forcing me to take my kids out of a school that they love?" We picketed every day. We had kids standing there with signs, "Why are you kicking me out of school?" When the governor had his state address, when everybody's supposed to be talking about how great it is, we had kids sitting in the gallery with shirts on, "Lift the cap." We had ecumenical prayer vigils in front of the governor's office. We had 30 of the top CEOs in the city take out a full-page ad saying, "You got to lift the cap." And it included people who support the governor. So we had and we just reached an agreement. And so we raised the cap by $7,500. We're now at $22,500. And we think that gets us past the next governor's cycle.
That's really helpful to understand the structure of what you were able to do to make this happen. So backing up a little bit, once you identify the small group of people, then what's a suggested first step to really start making change happen?
I think the first step is, Smitty, I've been talking a little bit about this, but I think that first of all, people really have to understand through getting the data, what is the situation in Portland? And I've been hearing since I've been here that people are nostalgic about a Portland that no longer exists. And that we got to come to grips with what has actually happened in Portland, because the way I understand it, there's certain people coming into the city, blacks are moving, and so the concentrations that used to exist may not exist. And so I would argue that there's 2 levels of work that have to go on. One is we need to get a clear understanding of what is happening in terms of academic achievement. We got to get a clear understanding of where people actually live and the politics of what the change has meant in terms of any strategy that you all might pursue. Because, I've read the report that Cascade did on the Jefferson cluster. And I actually was a part of a group about 8 years ago that studied Jefferson, actually when Ben Canada was the superintendent. And so the Jefferson story was like not totally new to me. But the one thing that's clear to me is there's been a significant change in that situation from the time that we studied it 8 years ago to now. And so all I'm saying is I think a small group of people who got resources and capacity need to develop the data, and we need to use the data to drive the strategy. And while I support parental choice, we need to determine what kind of parental choice would make sense in Portland, both from a practical standpoint, but also from a political standpoint. Because great ideas mean nothing if you can't actually get them into laws and into practice.
Thank you. Howard? Is that on? Dr. Fuller, thank you. You know that we do have a new segregation. It's segregation by real estate and by education. So if you look at a community like Lake Oswego, high real estate, high achievement, high education, high income. Irvington, high education, high real estate, high income, high achievement. And the parents in these homes, they push, they cajole, they prompt, they lean on their kids to excel in school. Aren't the parents the critical factor in kids excelling in school?
You know what? I'll bet you that a lot of these parents ain't cajoling nobody. And I know y'all might disagree with that, but we have this idea that because people are middle class or upper class, they're always on their kids about education. Let me present another idea. People who are upper class, middle class, who got money and are in control of school districts, the people who work in those schools know that if they don't produce for those kids, they're in trouble. And I would argue that it's not so much that the parents are cajoling as much as it is that people are clear about power. What's also clear is that when you're dealing with poor kids, if you don't produce, ain't nothing gonna happen to you. And so I would argue it's not exactly what you just said. Now, having said that, only a fool would stand up here and say, kids are not better off if they've got parents who are pushing them and supporting them. I would argue that there are a lot of poor parents who push and they try to get their kids to learn, but they don't have the power to impact the structures that their kids are in. The other thing that they don't have is, one of the things that I hate, and I'm gonna just say this, is I hate summer vacation. That's because I'm old and stuff now. I hated it when I was young. But the reality of it is all the research says that poor kids lose a tremendous amount over the summer because different than people with money, they're not taking trips to the Grand Canyon. They're not doing things that will enhance their intellectual development. They run it. They're in the streets. They dealing. So one of the things that we've been thinking about, like at our school, is that our kids just gonna have to go to school during the summer because we can't afford to let them have this period of time. And then when school starts, you spend the first 6 to 8 weeks trying to recapture what got lost during the summer. This is a reality that any educator in this room will tell you is a fact that happens with a lot of poor children. So I would argue that the difference really is what it is that people are able to provide for their children over and above what they get in schools. And then the next thing is the first thing that I mentioned, which is the power arrangement that people understand instinctively in these schools that they don't have to deal with in schools that are inhabited by poor kids. But again, I want to end to your question by saying, obviously, we want parents to be a force for their kids to the degree that they can. But you got to understand, and I know that you do, that there are poor parents out here who actually do work, because there is a working poor. You know, some of them are working 2 jobs, some of them are working nights. I mean, just trying to make do for their children, and it's very, very difficult for them to get involved in the politics of schooling in an effective way. So I just think we have to consider that when we're looking at the role of parents. Yes?
Howard?
I was just going to get one follow-up from him, and then I'll come over. Yep. Hmm? Right. Yeah, I think extended day, but the reason why I think extended day is important is because so many of our kids are behind. And the reality of it is you cannot bring kids who are behind to where they need to be in just a regular school day. And you really do need an extended school day. You need more time to work with these kids. Plus, I just have to say this. For a number of our kids, like at our school, I'm glad that they're hanging around, because if they weren't hanging around in school, they'd be in some situations that won't help them. That, to me, is the value of an extended day. But not all kids need that. You know, not all poor kids need that. Some kids do because of where they are in terms of their learning, but some kids don't.
If you look at the data in Portland, kids of color, disaggregated data from No Child Left Behind at the elementary school are really achieving at high levels with almost no exceptions. We have 60 elementary schools. It falls apart in the upper grades. So we have 16,000 kids in the high schools in the city. And you've seen the data on Jefferson. Doesn't look so different at Marshall, doesn't look so different at Roosevelt. If you let all those kids walk, where are they going to go? So I guess my question is, how do you create the supply of the new schools that educate those kids well when you're dealing with that kind of numbers? I think last year, 1,600 kids dropped out of high schools in Portland, which 1,600 is about equal to the largest comprehensive high school in the city. So the numbers are huge. Where do they go?
Well, I guess you could argue it's a chicken and egg question, because I would argue it's very difficult to talk about a supply if you have no capacity to realize that. In other words, like of the 110 schools that are part of the Milwaukee Pro-Choice Program, I'd say a third of those are new schools. We have black churches, for example, who stepped up to the plate and actually built new schools because of the voucher. And we've had over $90 million worth of investment in the poorest areas of Milwaukee because of the voucher. Because investors, bankers, and so forth are willing to invest money in schools because there's a funding stream. And if it weren't for that funding stream, we would not have the new schools. It's going to take a while to bring new schools online. But I want to caution everyone is that a voucher or a charter, they're not schools. They're mechanisms to get people to a school. You still have to create great schools. And anybody in this room who's ever tried to create a great school, that's hard. And it's much harder at the high school level, because you got kids who formed opinions about themselves, about learning. You've got kids, like in our school last year, we opened up in 9th grade. The average reading level was 6th grade. 47% of the kids were over age. We had 2 kids on a pre-K primer who were in the 9th grade. So the gravity of the problem is huge. But creating schools that say, no matter how hard it is, our mission, and it has to be like a mission, our mission is to educate these kids. The good thing we know is it can be done because there are educators in this country who figured out ways to reach these kids. And so I guess my argument would be until you actually have something in place that allows new schools to be created, you're unlikely to be able to do it.
What I have is less of a question, but more of a response to what the guy here was saying, is that there are low-income parents. I'm a low-income, I'm a single parent. My child is in 3rd grade. She reads higher than the 6th grade level. I sit on the PTA. I sit on the school site council. I'm on the principal selection team. I don't have a lot of money, but my child is succeeding in school. At the same time, what she told me the other day is, Mom, the only thing I learned in 3rd grade is that my teacher likes the Oregon Ducks, that her teacher assistant goes to PSU, and that we have 2 breaks and a lunch break. That's what she told me. That's all she learned. So for me, I'm involved, I'm active. What's the reason my child is not getting what she needs? So it doesn't necessarily have to do with the parents. And at the same time, when we hear this good school, bad school stuff, that they say, oh, Irvington's a good school, the parents are really involved, but there's 50+% of the African American children who aren't achieving. So what's so good about Irvington if little kids who look like my daughter don't get what they need at that school? At Lincoln, most of the African American children are not achieving, so that's not, it being a good school is not benefiting my child. So don't say it's the parents, the low income, all that stuff. I'm all of those things, but my child is going to succeed because I'm going to make sure of it. And I'm going to make sure that other children whose parents aren't as involved as I am are going to succeed too.
One more question.
Hard act to follow. I was going to say something longer, but we want to get out of here. I'm with an organization. About half a dozen engineers are looking for, well, I guess I'd say poor community nerds, young kids that are going to go out and be our next engineers, our next physicists, scientists, mathematicians. We're not politicians. We're not going to change the world. We're not especially great teachers. We could teach 2 or 3. And I'm wondering if there's, I'm asking this while the people are still gathered in this room, is there an organization that could use half a dozen engineers to teach your kids about computers or technology or something? Okay, well, talk to me after we're done. Thanks.
I think, Howard, your point would be that if you had a system that was open, it could take advantage of opportunities and offers like that. Could it
Yeah,
not?
but it seems like there's some people here who are going to take advantage of it, and so that's a good thing. Yeah, right. Is that it? Yes. Is there one last question to get people out at 8:30?
Yes, I wanted to know, with all the different points, especially what the lady was saying, and about students having priority of being allowed, and the politicians being allowed to know what is understandable about not only children who are on less than poverty, but all children, with all, if they're rich, poor, whatever their family, when they get to school, if they're hungry, if they're not hungry. How is it possible on a general, short and sweet way that you can, because politically, like you said, we may not be able to, we have to understand the politics of being able to make our decisions and people working together to be able to know the strategy of making change. How is it possible once we, parents and the community, the question is, know and have studied and do our homework on the politicians, the policies and procedures to compare with our strategy? How can you help to make our strategy work, and who do we talk to, because we may not be able to get straight to you because you're not like all the people who work for you, to be able to, for who do we come to once we are able and balanced to understand, okay, now these are the politics, these are pros and cons. We may not be able to even be more cons than pros. Fine, we know the strategies, fine, we know politics, but how and who can we talk to? And when we talk to it, how can we get over catch-22s and make it possible our strategies will work for our children?
Okay. First of all, actually, I'm pretty easy to get in touch with. I actually answer my own phone.
But I say just in case because you.
No, I'm telling you.
No, I'm saying that to say you only one person.
But you got to give me a chance to answer.
But let me just finish for.
Just like I listened to you give me the question.
Let me finish one more thing.
Okay. So you got another question?
No, it's part of. It's very important because it's something parents and I would see. We know we'll be able to get to you, but you're only one person.
Right.
How will
Okay, this was the second part.
24 hours in a day, who can you talk to?
Okay, this is the second part. When the question was asked over here, like, what do you do? What I tried to say was I thought you need to develop a small group of people in Portland who are willing to talk about a strategy that you all think will work. I believe, ultimately, that if you're going to do anything that requires a legislative change, and I think you've got to get a legislative champion, because otherwise it doesn't work. Because you've got to have someone in the legislature who is going to be a part of any strategy that you pursue that's going to be your champion in the legislature. That's just how that body works. And so I would argue that as people start planning, and if it's something that ultimately requires a legislative change, sooner than later, you're going to have to identify some legislators who are going to be willing to work with you as you try to make this change happen. What I was trying to say about me wasn't a snide remark. I was just trying to say, as I told Smitty, I live in Milwaukee. I travel all the time, but anything that I can do to help, I'm willing. He got my cell phone number, my home number, my email that comes to my trail, and so I can be reached. and I'm willing, and our organization is willing, to do anything that we can to help the people in Portland. And again, I just want to thank all of you all for taking your time out to come out this evening. And I hope at least some of the things we've talked about have been helpful. Thanks very much.